This episode was made possible through the generosity of our supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to see videos and hear podcasts before everyone else, become a supporter of Liz Law App on Patreon to support our work here at Byther Farm.
Hello and welcome back to the Byther Farm podcast. I'm Liz Sorb, and today I have with me an RHS trained award-winning garden designer, forest gardener and permaculture educator, author of A Plant Lover's Backyard Forest Garden and writer for Permaculture magazine, trustee of the Permaculture Association and jolly good egg, Pippa Chapman. Hello, Pippa.
Hello. Oh, it's lovely to be chatting to you today. Always a pleasure.
So thank you so much for joining me today. We are in, where are we? Middle of February. It's almost Valentine's Day. Is it Pancake Day today?
Oh, I don't follow that. And also we have pancakes every day, so
we have them regularly too. It's almost like Pancake Day.
Yes.
So Pippa, I think we met online first, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Through probably through Maddie and Tim Harland at Publications, who we both have books out with. And then we met in person. Was it last year?
At the Welsh Gathering.
Yes, so the Welsh Permaculture Gathering, sort of towards, was that beginning of September, I think it was.
September, yeah. There was 2 gatherings in September, permaculture gatherings, and I think it was the first one. So
yes, because I didn't go to the one in England because because I'd done my travelling about by then.
Yes, I have to say that two permaculture festivals in a row was a bit much for me as well. It took me about a week to recover.
Because not everyone's going to know you, would you like to explain a little bit about where you live? And the bit that I said about you at the beginning, I actually took most of that description, except for the good egg bit. I took it off your website. I added the good egg. Do you want to tell a little bit people about where you live and what you do?
Yes, so I live in Keighley in West Yorkshire. It's a steep-sided valley in the Aire Valley and very near to Charlotte Bronte country. So it's very much steep-sided valleys and moorland around where we live. I recently moved to a house on top of a hill, so I now have quite an exposed garden, but it's very sunny, which is great because my previous place was very shady. It lost the sun in sort of November, and then it didn't get it back until March. So even though we have much more wind and we're higher up, I just love it because it's sunny all year round. So that's really improved my growing. My background is ornamental horticulture, so I sort of did things in reverse, really. After doing a degree in fine art, I realised I didn't want to be a full-time artist. I wasn't enjoying that. I wanted to be outdoors, and so I got a job in a garden centre, which is a really nice small specialist nursery. Then I progressed up to head gardener of a private estate, which was really nice. But because I'd sort of had such a fast career progression, I was in a job where I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wanted to learn more. So I sort of did the odd thing of going from head gardener to horticultural trainee, which is a bit of an odd career move, but yeah, it felt like the right thing to do at the time.
So that was an RHS thing you did?
Yes, I went to do it was like a year-long apprenticeship working at Harlow Car in Harrogate in West Yorkshire, or is that North Yorkshire, I think. And yeah, that was brilliant. I just learned so much. And also they were at the time the sort of flagship for sustainability within the RHS. So it didn't ever get planted, but they were just planning a big acre forest garden. They were building a sustainable learning centre. So, that's sort of why I chose that. So that was a really brilliant year of rich learning and loads of fun. And then I left there and set up my own business with my now husband, who wasn't my husband at the time. So yeah, I poached one of their top employees from the RHS, and we started our business together. And yeah, I mean, it's evolved over time. It started very much about sort of selling plants and forage jams and jellies and teaching courses. And now, over the last sort of 13 years, I think it is now, we're mainly doing garden development and maintenance, mostly of gardens which are have forest gardens within them. And we do consultations, and I do some writing now, which yeah, so it's sort of really changed over time. But yeah,
Yeah.
really love where it's got to at the moment.
So your book is about a backyard forest garden. So it's an attainable thing. It's I think very often the idea of, let's step back a bit. Let's go back a
Yeah.
step and just talk a little bit about the idea, the kind of the overall idea of forest gardening and a forest garden, because we use the expression all the time, but I'm conscious that not everybody is familiar with it. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you see a forest garden?
Yeah, I think I mean, quite often we started to in the UK use the more American term food forest, because that is a bit more, I've had people come up to me when I'm doing sort of book launches and things like that, book signings, and say, oh, I've got this shady bit in my garden, yeah, I'd love a forest garden. And I then have to explain, no, it's all about a multi-layered food system, a kind of ecology, a really nice microclimate and an ecosystem that happens to also be edible. It's not about going and planting fruit trees in a forest. That's a very different thing. So I think, in some respects, it's a shame that forest gardening is the term that we all use now, because it can be a bit confusing, I think, to people who haven't done it before. And so I very much use both terms, because sometimes I'm designing a forest garden that's not just about being edible. It might be medicinal, or it might be to do with craft plants. So I think, yeah, if we start at the very basics, it's really about growing in a small space or a large space, but looking at growing in all the different vertical space that we can, right from large trees to small trees and shrubs, and then the underlayer, the herbaceous layer, and the ground cover and the root layer, and then climbing plants that will grow up through all of those layers. And I just love it, because however much I love growing food, I do find quite often that growing just in blocks of vegetables is not massively inspiring. It doesn't sort of get me really excited about designing it. So I love designing and looking after food forests. But I think as well that when I first became interested in forest gardening, it was very much a kind of, oh, well, you have to move and buy an acre and then you can grow a food forest, then you can do forest gardening. And it wasn't really until I was doing my permaculture design course, and we were working on a project called Horton Community Farm, which is still going in Bradford, a really amazing community garden project. And I really wanted to design a forest garden, but my group got given the community area. So I was feeling really, really quite annoyed, because I was desperate to design a forest garden. And at the time, the RHS were doing a 3 metre by 3 metre vegetable plot. So sort of trying to look at maximising how much food you could grow in terms of annual vegetables in this 3 metre by 3 metre bed. So I thought, great, I'm going to design a forest garden in a 3 metre by 3 metre bed so it can fit right in the community area. So really, it was my way of getting round the brief that I'd been set. And that sort of really set off my whole journey with small scale forest gardening. So it was just coincidence that that was the very first forest garden I ever designed was a very small one.
But the joy of them is that they do work over any size.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
one that I'm creating at the moment is over actually quite a large area, but I'm doing it in strips. So I'm doing like these linear blocks, which actually, if you took them all and squashed them all together, actually wouldn't be a very big space at all.
Yeah.
But I'm just doing these thin stripes, but partly because we're on a north facing slope.
Yeah.
and it's pretty wet, and we're in the middle of a wind farm, so it's fairly windy. And so it was about managing light and managing water. And in my garden, it's a case of getting the water off the land rather than trying to hold on to it.
Yeah.
I always look at things like, when I'm looking at permaculture videos, and they're always talking about using swales and slowing the movement of the water off the land, and I'm thinking, no, dig a big channel and get it
Yeah,
away
get
quickly.
it off.
But
Yeah,
that's about, that's just about working with the space that we've got. So
yeah, and recently, well, I say recently, time always goes faster than I think. Last spring, I did a one, I think it was 1 meter by 3 meter food forest border for the Harrogate Flower Show.
amazing.
And that was really, I mean, it was quite challenging to design something in such a small space, but actually, it worked really well, and it was really fantastic to have conversations with loads of people that came and talk to them about, well, actually, yes, this is called forest gardening, and you can actually fit it in this small border. In most average size gardens, this would fit in.
I'm
So
nodding
yeah.
frantically here. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, even though I do love designing large scale forest gardens as well, and I do that as part of my work, I find that the smaller the space, the more interesting the challenge is. And then if you add in, boggy or shady, or it's yeah, I think it's good to narrow down your parameters.
Yeah, and actually that, I think we all know that the smaller the space, the more efficient we get
Mm,
with how we
yeah.
use it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've just moved from 5 acres to a suburban garden. So, yeah, I've definitely found that you are much more efficient with how you use your space. And I have had to force myself to leave space for nature as well. It's
Yeah.
very easy to want to cultivate every single square inch of your garden, but that's not what permaculture is about. So, I am having to, put in dead hedges and leave some weedy patches with log piles and things. But yeah, it's been a completely different challenge. To before I did have 5 acres, but most of my gardening was in my yard, which is hence why I wrote the book. But now I don't have that lovely 5 acres of wilderness and wildlife to sort of plant here and there in amongst. I've very much got a small front garden and a medium-sized back garden.
Yeah.
So yes, it does make you be more efficient.
So well, one of the things it does do, not only does it kind of focus your mind, but actually allows you to be in something. It makes you be more targeted in what you're choosing to grow. So have you noticed big changes in what you're choosing to grow from your yard previously to your garden now?
Well, I think one of the main differences is that I have lots of sunshine in this garden. So it's this last summer when we had that heat wave. I mean, in West Yorkshire, we didn't have any rain in 6 weeks, not a single drop, which was just unheard of. We never really have to think about water shortages much on the hills in Yorkshire, but that was a real challenge, and particularly suddenly having a really sunny garden that I haven't had before. So I've been able to grow a different range of plants. I've just thinking of trying a Chilean guava here, which I could never have grown before because we didn't get enough sun for anything to ripen.
And
So
those are
yeah, I
really
think
pretty plants anyway, aren't they?
they are, and they're really delicious. So I'm really hoping, I mean, we're quite high up here, but I think because it's so sunny that if I plant it against the house wall, that it should be all right.
I've seen
Um,
them growing in pots in West Wales.
right, okay.
So I think there is the potential for them to do quite well.
Right. Oh, lovely. Well, I will keep my fingers crossed because that would be something that I could never have grown before in my
But
previous house.
that was at Towan and Hoppy Wimbush's place at
Okay.
Lammas Eco Centre.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to see that they had those in pots. It was and they were
Yeah.
very excited about them. So
Well, do you know, I'm terrible at growing in pots because I'm really bad at remembering to water, which is funny really, because I had a plant nursery for about 10 years and watering was the thing I absolutely hated. So
Yes.
I even though I love propagating plants, I loved having a plant nursery. I loved going and doing plant fairs and talking to people about, all things plants. I don't miss the stress of the watering. So here at our new house, I am trying to get everything in the ground and have almost nothing in pots. So yeah, that's my mission here. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm having to be a bit more selective really in my previous garden, because we also had quite a bit of land where we had lots of apple trees and pear trees, and we had a separate vegetable garden that we could grow our potatoes and onions and some of our staple crops in. It meant that the yard forest garden could be more sort of just salady crops and some fruit and a bit of soft fruit. Now I'm having to try and incorporate all of that into one smaller, much smaller space. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking definitely more about what each plant can give me, rather than just thinking, oh yes, it'd be nice to have some roses in the yard because don't they look nice? Now I'm thinking, well, if that rose doesn't have rose hips, then it's not going to go because it doesn't have enough
Yeah.
yields for me. So yeah, so I think I am definitely being more selective. Things have to work harder.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is you've had the time to try out different things in your last place. So, for example, you can try out more exotic isn't the right word, but more unusual plants. And, there are things like, kales, which I knew you grew a kale as a tree, didn't you?
Yes.
I remember seeing that on the internet, or maybe I saw it on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I want to grow. And I can't remember if it was a Benton's or a Taunton
It was a
Dean.
Taunton Dean, yeah.
And I've got one in the garden, and at the moment, and the stems we've got to about 2.5 feet high, 3 stems that kind of starting to twirl around each other, which hopefully will make quite a nice solid trunk. But it's so
Yeah.
windy here, it just gets knocked
Yeah.
over all the time.
Well, do you know, it's funny because I think the kale tree is the thing that most people talk to me about, oh, I was so inspired, so I've grown a kale tree as well. And I think it started off a bit of a kale tree trend, which is great. But yeah, same here. We've moved house now and our garden is so windy here. There's no way that I could grow a kale tree in our new garden.
The other
Because
thing
it,
that I decided was actually, however much I like them, that's a luxury because we don't actually eat kale. We don't. I like
yes.
the plants, but we don't actually eat them. So we
Yes.
have
Well,
that process of elimination.
we eat a lot of kales. I think there was one year where every single day we were eating a combination of potatoes, kale, and pumpkin with something else, So we do eat a lot of kale in our house. But it's the same with us with rhubarb. I love how rhubarb looks, but I really don't like to eat it. So in our new garden, I'm limiting myself to one small plant so that my husband can make himself some jam because I really dislike rhubarb.
So I wasn't keen on rhubarb for the longest time.
Mm.
And now I've learned to have just a small amount of rhubarb, and now I have it with sweet Sicily rather than with sugar,
Oh yes,
or rather
yeah.
than so much sugar. I prefer it, and I've also learned to put ginger in it. So I'm putting lots of things in it
Oh,
to
okay,
kind of
yeah.
take the taste of the
Take the
rhubarb
rhubarb
away.
away. Well, maybe I'll have to try sweet Sicily and the ginger because I do like ginger. So maybe if we throw all that in, it'll make a jam that I actually want to eat.
And then I use it for making wine. So,
Oh,
we
okay.
eat a little bit in the winter. We kind of go, okay, we'll have a rhubarb crumble, which I
Mm,
then mix with an awful lot of apple so that it's
mm,
apple and
yeah.
rhubarb.
Yeah, mostly apple flavored.
So yeah, so I've done the whole we've actually got a lot of rhubarb here. We've got 8 or 10 plants of rhubarb.
Right, gosh, yeah.
But I do use it for making rhubarb wine, so I'm justifying it in that way.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Also, I
yes,
just love the
I've
plants.
tried winemaking in the past, but I've never been successful yet. So maybe I ought to give that another go with my rhubarb. I've got all the
Yes.
equipment, but I think I tried it 3 times and it just never quite worked out right. But I mean, to be honest, Andrew, my husband, he's really good at actually processing things and making things. So he makes things like sauerkraut, and he's just started making a really nice fruity vinegar, which, as far
Nice.
as I understand, because I don't get too involved in these things, as far as I understand, it turns into wine before you turn it into vinegar. So maybe I ought to ask him to show me how to do it.
I
But
think
yeah,
I think
maybe rhubarb
winemaking.
vinegar would be nice.
Sorry,
Maybe rhubarb vinegar would be nice.
I think it would.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of the thing that I don't like about rhubarb is when it's very sour, when it's very tart, and it
Mm.
kind of turns your face inside out. Um, but I also don't like the texture of it very much.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of a bit slimy and things. Which is why if I make it into a syrup or into a jelly or into wine, it's far more acceptable because then I get in the flavour without that
Mm.
sliminess.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll have to give it a try and let you know.
Yeah, no, the wine comes out. It's not quite white, but it's got the slightest hint of pink in it. But it comes out
Mm.
like really clear very quickly.
Right.
But the thing that I've learned with all wines is, however good they taste when you kind of first make them, they taste 20 times better a year later or
Oh,
even a
okay.
year after that.
Right. Maybe that's where I've gone wrong, trying to drink it all too quickly.
It's definitely, I think winemaking is a patience game. If you're making fruit wines with none of the kind of manufactured additives in it, it is a
Mm.
waiting game. It's that thing of being really patient.
Right. Okay.
But then we have
Right.
that with gardening, don't we? The thing
Yes,
about
that's very true.
slow, small steps, the
Mm.
taking time and the waiting and that anticipation. What is
Yes,
it what is it that you are looking forward to this growing season?
well, we have moved our polytunnel into our new garden from our old field. So we got as far as putting the frame up before it rained non-stop for months.
Yeah.
And so it's still got no plastic on it. So one thing I'm really looking forward to is having a bit of undercover growing space so that when it rains and it's horizontal rain, that I can still get outside in our garden and do a bit of pottering about. I think we have very much been concentrating on the house. The house has needed a lot of work. It's still got its original 1970s kitchen. So, yeah, it's very slow progress. And the garden has been a bit left behind, even though it is our most important thing. It's our joint passion for both of us. We've
Mhm.
had to actually make a livable house, particularly for the kids. But we've got to the point of it's livable now. So it might not be decorated or perfect, and we might still have 2 bedrooms with no ceilings upstairs, but but we have started to move a bit of attention to the garden. So yes, yeah, I think just getting out in our new garden, really. We have been here 12 months now, but actually in terms of developing a garden, that's not very long,
No,
as I'm
it's
sure
really
you
not.
know.
So, but this year you are going to definitely be growing a load of your own food.
Yes, definitely. And in fact, we did start the front garden. So when we moved in, the back garden was a jungle. There was huge overgrown leylandii, there was brambles, and the next door's laurel hedge had grown about 3 meters into our garden. So it was very much you couldn't see sky really when you were
Mm.
stood in the back garden.
I'm pulling faces
So
here. That's like every gardener's worst nightmare. Leylandite,
mm,
brambles, and
yes, and
laurel.
laurel
Oh
hedging.
dear.
So it's taken us a lot longer to sort of work our way through that. But the front garden, we very quickly put down cardboard, made some no-dig beds, and put in some vegetables. So we were, last year we still managed to grow some peas and beetroot and Swiss chard and kale and a few other annual things, some leeks. So we've got those beds ready to go. But we're ready to get some more no-dig beds in the back garden and a polytunnel full of tomatoes. That's the thing. Andrew's big passion is tomatoes, so he'll be growing several hundred as usual at some point soon. He's breeding his own varieties and doing lots of trials all the
That's
time.
really
So.
exciting.
Yes, it is. I mean, we have a great blight resistant potato that he's bred that we're going to be sharing around soon. And he's trying to grow, particularly because up here we have a bit of a shorter growing season. It's the frosts come later than other areas, and it later in the spring and then start earlier in the winter. So we have to have some quite quick cropping tomatoes. So he's been breeding for plants that will crop quickly, but also dwarf tomatoes, so that the trusses actually start producing fruit much nearer to the ground. So in a polytunnel situation, you can get more tomatoes, more fruit in, because the fruit all develops closer together, if that makes sense.
That would
But
be
also
really
flavour.
useful.
Yes, really useful. But flavour is the number one. So it might be blight resistant and really heavy cropping, but if it doesn't taste nice, then that's it. It's out.
Last year I tried 6 different varieties of tomatoes, and I bought them on the grounds that they were supposed to be the best tasting cherry tomato and the best tasting, and I didn't get a beef tomato because I'm not huge on those very big ones, but they were all supposed to be like these amazing taste ones. And of course we had very little sunshine at the time when the tomatoes were doing anything, and we had a lot of rain. So what I had was, I did have quite a lot of tomatoes before blight hit, but they all tasted really watery, and there was no sweetness in them because they just hadn't had the sunshine to develop the sugars. What a disappointment.
We had a lot of people last year who were getting in touch with us and saying, why are my tomatoes really doing badly? And it was just a really bad year, a really bad year for tomatoes last year. I mean, because we had just moved house. That was our first year for a long time that we didn't grow. Well, I think we grew 3 outdoor tomatoes, and that was it, because we didn't have anywhere to put them. I wasn't too sad that we missed filling a polytunnel full of them, seeing as they didn't seem to do very well.
No, they didn't do very well, and blight seemed to arrive early. Because we'd had those very wet conditions. And in terms of tomatoing, I thought that was a very disappointing season. So I am looking forward to
Yes, fingers
2024
crossed.
and starting over again.
I think it, we try and grow. I mean, Andrew is a bit of a seedaholic, so he's probably got about 50 plus different varieties of tomato seed that he tries different ones of every year alongside his trials. And so it's really, I find it really exciting that every year we get to try a few completely new tomatoes that we've not tried before and assess them for taste. And I mean, we grow everything from the cherries to the ginormous beefsteak ones. And we make all our own passata. So it was a really difficult last year that once we'd used up our last jars of our own homemade passata, we had to start buying tinned tomatoes again, which I hadn't done for a long time. So
They don't taste the same, do they?
No, they don't taste the same. No, but and I know that mostly what I do is forest gardening, but we do grow a lot of annual things as well, and I really enjoy all the different flavors. I mean, forest gardening is fantastic for a lot of things, but I think if you're going to try and be self-sufficient, you do need to grow annual crops as well, unless you happen to have a whole acre plus to try and forage off. If you're living in a small space, then you need some annual crops in there as well.
Yeah. So let's move on a little bit from home and what you're doing around home. What does 2024 bring for you work-wise?
Well, I have all sorts on. I'm actually just about to be a guest speaker for a course at Harvard University, which is very exciting.
Wow.
Bit nerve-wracking. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to be teaching a permaculture design course in Saltaire, which is a town just down the road from here, and hoping to run permaculture design courses in Keighley as well. Trying really hard to, I suppose, work out where to best put my energies in terms of helping mitigate the climate emergency. So I'm trying to do some more local work, I would say, trying to do things like set up a seed library, because let's face it, if we have food shortages in this country and everyone decides to grow their own, I think COVID showed that seeds is the first bit where we all fall down because we can't get hold of any. So I want to help start up a local seed library. I am doing more writing, so need to get on with that.
So
As I'm sure you know,
is that for a new book?
Yes, yeah, that's for a new book, which I'm very excited about. So it's going to be more design based rather than just talking about forest gardening.
Now, do we think that's going to come out this year or next year?
Good question. It depends. It depends on yes, how it goes with some of the other work that I've got on at the moment. I'm hoping this year, but we will see. Yeah.
So if it is this year, will you come back and talk to me in depth about the book?
Yes, definitely. I would love to. Yes, I would love for it to be this year, but yeah, as always, I'm trying to juggle about 100 things at once. So. Yeah, I have made a good start and I'm progressing, but yeah, I do have a tendency to sort of do a chunk of work and then something else will get in the way, and then I'll have a couple of months of doing nothing. So I think because I do it alongside my other business work, it's not like I sit down and have a day a week where I do writing, or a couple of solid months where I do writing. I don't have that luxury, unfortunately. So yeah, so we'll see how that goes, but that's quite exciting. I'm really enjoying working on that. And I have another exciting project I'm working on, but I can't tell anyone about what it is yet because it is a top secret project. But it's yeah, it's a very exciting forest garden project, which will be I will be able to talk about in spring 2025. So maybe I'll come back then and talk to you about that.
Looking forward to hearing about that. Oh, that'd be amazing to hear more about that. Okay, so Pippa, we are going to run out of time before too long. So would you like to tell everybody where they can find out more about you, where they can find you online and all of that sort of thing?
Yes, so we have our website, thoseplantpeople.com. That is mostly our sort of consultation design side of the business on there. But I do post quite actively on Instagram as Pippa Chapman _ those plant people, and I do a bit on Facebook as well as Pippa Chapman, but mostly I'd say I'm posting on Instagram. And we do have a YouTube channel, but you may have noticed we haven't put anything new on there in a while. That's been one of the things that I've videoed more content for, and I just haven't had time to edit it together. So that's been a bit frustrating. Yeah, it does. Time that I don't have at the moment. So there are quite a few videos on there around forest gardening and ramial wood chip and perennial kales and things like that, and a few on tomato breeding if you want to get nerdy about tomato breeding. But yeah, I'm hoping to do a new series of videos about our new garden, really, and how we've developed it, how we've designed it using the permaculture design process, and the different elements within it. But yes, I haven't got around to that yet, unfortunately.
They'll come.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that I leave links to your website and to YouTube and to Instagram and Facebook in the show notes. And all I can say is, Pippa, thank you so much for joining me.
No, it's been lovely. It's been really nice. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome. Thanks.
The podcast you've been listening to is a By the Farm production. All rights reserved.